Welcome everybody. I'm Jane Harvey, and like Stephen and Helen, I'm a trustee of ALL. You're very welcome to our second webinar on sharing. It's a sharing webinar on the speaking endorsement. But before we get down to the speaking, I wanted to say a word about ALL. If you're not already a member, ALL is the subject association for us professionals working in language education. It's run by teachers for teachers. It has a very well-established and thriving network of branches, hubs, and branches, networks, and hubs. That's right. And tonight we're the guests of one of our largest ones. That's ALL London, which Helen is the chair, and who organises these fantastic webinars for us. We're always looking for new members, and I know a lot of people, I've seen on Twitter how much people are enjoying the ALL webinars. So if you don't belong, please come and join us. And now is a particularly good time to join, because we're just in the run-up to our conference, Language World. That's going to be on the 12th and 13th of March. This year it's going to be a first for us. It's an online conference, obviously. And it's a fantastic event we've got for you with lots of great speakers. Members have generously volunteered to run workshops and talks on all kinds of different topics, as well as we've got some great speakers, including our friend Michael Wardle from Ofsted. So it's a fantastic deal. It's £30 for 2 days of CPD. All of it's available, of course, because it's online, so you don't have to worry if things clash, because you'll be able to access them later. And at the moment, if you're not a member and you join now, you'll get a 10% discount off your membership, and then you can join the Language World at the members rate. So, as I say, if you're not a member already, do please join us and come to Language World. And if you are a member, haven't yet signed up for Language World, well, you should get on with it, because we've got such a great programme. We want to see everyone there. But that's enough from me for the moment. So I'll be monitoring the chat, and I'll speak again at the end when we get to the question and answer. And I'm just going to hand over now to Stephen, who's going to start the evening.
Thank you. Yes, I'm just doing a little bit of history before Helen takes us into the future. So what's been happening about this issue to do with speaking and the idea of endorsement began back in the summer, when Ofqual put out their consultation at the request of the Secretary of State, which was about trying to reduce the amount of work involved in preparing for exams in 2021 because of the amount of school time lost already in 2020 when they put out that request. So we had our first webinar at that point, which was information about what was in that consultation. And then that consultation obviously went back and was followed up by the Ofqual people. And then they produced in October the proposals for the endorsement criteria. They selected speaking as an area of the languages curriculum where some school time could be saved by avoiding having the exams, and instead by suggesting endorsement by teachers of observations that they've made in the ordinary running of their lessons. So then they produced those criteria, and they announced those in November. All of these are on the ALL website on a link I'll show you on the next screen, which summarizes all of the different processes and gives you the documents as well. Sometimes they're edited so they're not as long as the original documents, and you just get the key points. So in December then we had our first sharing webinar, the idea being that we are sharing with you things that we know from contacts with other organizations and people in the exam boards and that sort of thing. And then you share with each other and with everybody strategies and ideas about what sort of things are working for you or might work for you in the context of gathering the sort of information that you might need to be able to give your endorsement. So in that one, what we did was to review and remind people of what had happened before. And then we considered light touch activities that would be speaking for a purpose, that wouldn't take up too much time from the reading and the writing and the listening, which people were concentrating on. And that was at a time before the latest lockdown, of course, so people at that time were still in schools. So some of the things they suggested have changed since because of the context. So we have to say a big thank you to Helen for that event in particular, because as well as hosting it, She also led most of the event, as she's going to do this evening, and she produced a lot of documentation that people found very useful, all of which is available on the website now. So then in January, we had the new consultation that came out about what's the future of grades in summer 2021. There's a briefing about that on the website. If you haven't read that one yet, I'm sure you have. And we understand that there will be an announcement about that, but not before the week of the 22nd of February. That, of course, concerns all of the subjects, not just languages. Speaking endorsement is unique to us. And that's why we've come back now for a second sharing webinar in February, because the context has changed. We have more people at the moment, most people indeed, who are not in school. So the process of speaking and gathering information is complicated by that, or maybe complicated. There may be solutions people have found to that as well. So shortly, all being well, we'll have a mixed economy again, with some people in school and some people not in school. And Helen will talk more about that in just a moment. So our aim this evening is again to remind us of things that we have learnt from the various documents coming from DFE and Ofqual, and then add to the store of ideas that we already gathered in December, which is all available on the website for people to have a look at and download and use as they think best. So that's what our content is. Everything I've talked about is on that link at the top, the speaking endorsement page of the ALL website, which is a public page. It's open to anyone who'd like to look at it. You don't need to be a member to look at that page. Although once you've looked at it, you'll obviously be thinking, I really should be a member of ALL so I can see these things when they turn up. So you'll find the history of the process. And I've just picked out one or two of the key points from those different stages, just to remind us of them at the beginning of this evening. So the aim of the first consultation was to identify ways of saving time. So it's not about creating work for teachers. And if it is creating work, then there's something we need to do to address that. That's not the intention of the Secretary of State and of Ofqual decisions. So they've told us that with this endorsement procedure, there is no requirement for evidence or for formal testing. The intention is to pick up your information from your classroom when you're doing speaking in the classroom. The next thing on your webpage you'll find are the final criteria with some interpretation of those and planning documents. And again, just to remind us, we've got 3 possible outcomes for people who do their speaking, who provide evidence for their speaking: pass, merit, and distinction. And there is a further category for people who aren't able to do their speaking for one reason or another. And that's it. So we've just got those 3 big fields to fit our students into. So the next thing on that web page is the speaking menus. These are the outcomes from the December sharing meeting. So there are all sorts of ideas about how you can do speaking informally, how you can ask your students to do speaking, not always with you, how they can do it in different groupings, and so on and so on. Since then, there's been extra exam boards guidance, so there's references to those. Again, Helen will pick up on that in her session. And then at the bottom of that page, there is a large range of articles from different ALL publications on aspects of speaking. If you or your colleagues or your trainee teachers, if you have them involved at the moment, are looking for things about speaking, you'll find certainly several dozen articles there. There may be as many as 100. So here's what we're going to try and do this evening. We're hoping that we're going to be reassuring and positive and looking about ways of doing things rather than issues that already are affecting us. First of all, we'll share some reminders, and then we'll go on to have this sharing session with everyone invited to contribute, where we're looking for strategies for light touch speaking activities, which are purposeful as well in serving our needs in the areas of reading and listening and writing. And in those 2 contexts, when we have our students working remotely, or as and when they are back in our classrooms. And then, as Helen said just now, we'll collate everything and put it on the same web page, which you'll see, you've seen the link already, but you'll get that again in the notes that you get from Helen after the event. So just to start us off before I pass to Helen, first thing to remind us of is that we are not in a fair situation. The world is in a total mess. That's not our fault. We can only do what we can do. We're professionals, so we like to share things. We have principles, which we like to maintain as well. And we can try to reassure ourselves and each other that we are all trying to do something which is useful for our students, for our schools, and satisfying for us professionally as well, without creating an enormous amount of work. And just the last quotation there is the one from the consultation in January, just reinforcing the fact that English has a speaking endorsement within their GCSE, and then in bold, this is also the approach for GCSE Modern Foreign Languages in 2021, which is the latest information that we have. So that's the point where I'm going to pass over to Helen, who's going to start us thinking about some of the key questions.
Do you see a slide which says AWL Speaking Endorsements Sharing Webinar?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Here goes then. Thank you very much for that introduction, Stephen. I think that really, really helps to set the scene. So this is what we're planning to do. And when we get to the red bit, that's where we're going to be asking people to join in a lot. So we've got here a list of key questions for preparing for this. And I've got 11 questions there. And also, if I can just say, I've got David sitting here as well, who's been here at other webinars. So I'm going to ask you if you want to chip in at any time with a head teacher ASCL perspective, if necessary. So what are the requirements? As you've said, and Stephen has pointed out, and we've got references to it on the site, the Ofqual documentation is there, so there were requirements, and then there were particular subject level conditions for languages. Stephen said that we would then show you the criteria, remind you of what the criteria are. So there was a joint exam board speaking endorsement criteria, which I'll show on the next slide. But also later on, they issued a joint exam board range grid. And that's something which I've discovered quite a few people are not so aware of that. And it's something where you actually have to go to your particular exam board to find it. So we will put the links, and I think Stephen has already put the links on the AWL site. Because obviously it's really important to be clear about these definitions, how to award them, and really noting this minimum that's required, but it is essential to have interaction. That's really very important. So there we've got the joint exam board criteria. All of them have got exactly the same wording for the 4 aspects of communication, interaction, range of language, accuracy, pronunciation, intonation. And here they are at pass, merit and distinction. And some more teacher pupil friendly versions have now come out. So AQA has brought this out in their training, which I went to. And it really helps this way, because here you've got for each of the elements of communication, interaction, range, accuracy and pronunciation, it's listed here what the elements are. And the really important thing is that every single element within any level descriptor must be met in order to get that overall level in that aspect. So on this, every single one of those bullet points has to be ticked in order for someone to get a distinction in that. Every single one of that has to be ticked to become a merit. So that was a point that they were really stressing. And here I've just gone away and made a version of that in a way that might be helpful for people. And you're well, you know, I'll put a link to this onto the site, where all I've done is just to put for each aspect, you can then write in the level that they get, just to make it absolutely clear then how you've reached your overall level. Later on, we've got some little exercises which you might want to try out, where we'll put out and say, which level would you expect that to be? So that's that part of it. This is the bit which I found some people haven't come across, which is the range, where for these particular areas where they're talking about range of language, where you've got words simple, occasionally complex and complex, that's where the exam board, I think in response to us requesting this actually, said, well, this is what we would this is what we think range is, so that you will look at it here. You've got it covers a page and a bit on the for what they have to do for the pass. There's the merit and there's the distinction. So again, and we showed this in the last webinar, I've done a version where I've adapted it, and this is what page 1 of 2. So they're divided into descriptions about range in sentences, in structures, in verbs, and in time frames. So that's something that might help. I've just realized that I know why. This is a version where I was not telling the children the words pass, merit, and distinction. I was just showing them this is the sort of thing that might happen. So obviously you could have a version where you have the words pass, merit, and distinction. But that still perhaps might be not sufficiently pupil friendly, so that I'm sorry I haven't got an example to show you, but it's somebody in the department in the school where I work who's come out with a much better version, I think, where it is a really pupil friendly version, saying this is what it could look like for pass, this is what it could look like for the merit and distinction, so that perhaps not using words like different persons of the verb or modal verbs. I don't know, but certainly it is something which I think would be a really useful thing to get a pupil friendly version. So remember, we're going through these 11 questions. Another one might be, where is there any guidance? Well, if you go to your exam board, you'll find that there's guidance there. And Stephen has already mentioned the fact that if you go onto the site, which he's curating, which is, I can really recommend it. It's got everything you need to know there. There's guidance there. So it might be worthwhile checking before we go any further. Do we understand this business about levels? So if you'd like to join in, you could put in the chat. Don't have to, but a reminder as to what these levels are. You've got, sorry, there we are. Here's a sample here where you've got communication and interaction, pass, merit, distinction, range of language, pass, merit, distinction, accuracy, pass, merit, distinction, and pronunciation, intonation, pass, merit, distinction. So for each of those, you have to then say which level do you think they are. Then from that, you're going to work out what the overall level is. And this is where the rule really is that you will get the one for your communication interaction as long as 2 others are at the same level or higher. You can get away with having one aspect, one lower, and you will still get whatever you got for communication and interaction. And something which is available, will be available for you to download if you want to, is something which David put together for me as to, so if you start with the communication interaction, which is the most important thing, absolutely the most important thing, then if you get a distinction in that and all 3 at distinction, you'll get overall distinction. Distinction of that, 2 at distinction, 1 at merit, a distinction. But a distinction, if there are 2 at distinction but 1 at pass, then will be a merit. I'm not going to read it all through, but just so you know that that is going to be available for you if you feel that that might be helpful. So let's look at this first one. First of all, if you want to put in the chat, will someone call out, or Stephen, you might want to join in, or anybody. So for communication interaction, what level would they get for that top one? We look to see what people would say. Is it going to be P, M, or D for the top one? And right, so I'm afraid it's not distinction because you haven't got that tick there. There's 1 there, but it's got to be total there. All of that has to be ticked, every single bit, for it to be a distinction. So in fact, it's a merit. It's a merit for that one. What about the next one? Range. That's quite straightforward, I think. Yeah, range. Distinction. Accuracy is distinction. Pronunciation and intonation is distinction. But the important thing is, because you didn't get that totally full, the overall will be merit.
Merit.
Yes. Well done, EB15. Next one, sample 2. What have we got here? Communication, interaction, distinction. Range of language, distinction. Accuracy, merit. Pronunciation, intonation, merit, because it didn't have it totally there. So what's the overall going to be? It's not going to be distinction, it will be merit. Oh, by the way, also down here, this was something which AQA suggested, that you could actually, you've got to show that you've got to, of the 3 themes, you have to do at least 2. and there should be at least 2 different types of context. And really that's because, isn't it, if you to do communication interaction, you have to have something where there is some sort of to and fro, whether it's live or whether it's virtual, whatever, there has to be a to and fro, but it would be all right to do 1 to and fro one and 1 presentation. Sample 3, what have we got here? We've got all of those are 4, so it's pass for there. And this is pass, this is pass, this is pass. It's going to be a pass. Mm-hmm. Yes, because we've got both themes and we've got those 2 things there. Sample 4, what's this going to be? So communication interaction is merit. So they can get that merit as long as there are 2 others which are merit or above. And have we got that here? Range, yes, is a merit. Accuracy, no, is a pass. Pronunciation, intonation, no, is a pass. Therefore, what's the overall going to be? Anybody?
Pass.
Yeah. Okay, so even though that looks like a solid merit, it's not, because 2 of them are not a merit.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final one. Here we got all merit. So are we going to give them a merit? Yes, we could do. The range is okay, but the accuracy is a pass. So no, so it's going to be, can only be a pass. Is it going to be a pass? I've put a little trick in here. Can we give it an endorsement? No, because it's only covered 1 theme. So you've got to have the 2 themes. Okay, I find that quite anxious. I only did that just before, so I wasn't sure I was going to get all of those. Is that okay for everybody?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so, but really that's where it's up to us, isn't it? That we as the teachers, to be honest, if we can see that there's something missing, then we can make sure that we can fill it in. So personally, I don't see a problem with that. But I don't know if anybody has got a concern. Is there any questions about that? Is that all right? What I'll do, that will all be available if you want to use that, if you find it might be useful to do with your department.
There's a question, Helen, from Vincent about what different context actually means. So would it mean something like the photo card versus the role play versus the conversation?
Well, I'll be honest, I think that with the presentation that we had from AQA, it seemed to imply that, but really it's not, because when you look at the Ofqual guidance, it really is to do with the fact you've got to have a context, I think, where in order to satisfy that criteria, you need a context, don't you, where there are 2 people speaking to each other. So I think that's the thing. You can't get away with just having someone presenting. You look as if you're about to say something then.
Yeah, and the actual Ofqual guidance doesn't use the word context. It says just different tasks, different themes in where it's saying. So again, I'd be almost quite relaxed about it, as long as there's some aspect of difference. I think that's the key thing, to be able to just, well, we'll come on later to this notion of ticking with integrity. But I've just been watching some of the comments going through. This document definitely doesn't go to the exam board. Nothing goes to the exam board, as we'll see later, other than the overall declaration that students have had the opportunity. So this is only for internal bits, and it's this phrase, can you tick with integrity, but don't get too stressed about it. Otherwise you just end up tripping yourself. I've seen some of the comments around like it's Sudoku and so on. And yeah, it's almost just relax a bit and get something that you can tick with integrity and know that you can fill the gaps in, because you've got between now and May to be able to do something that enables you to give the level that you think the student is probably deserves to get. And
you're right, that yes, the student does need to achieve all aspects of the communication interaction to be awarded a grade at all. Yes. Yeah. Because if they don't get it, then, if they got the pass and if they've missed something out, then no, you won't get anything.
EB15, there's no requirements around how long the task should be, etc. It's very, very, very open, and just comes back to this notion of typical classroom, use your judgment, just get some sense of integrity.
Which there, Vincent, it doesn't have to be an exam situation. It really, and this is where we'll come on to this, because in the last webinar we did talk about this, the fact that it really didn't have to be a formal situation. And I should have made it clear that all of these were just suggestions. Even from AQA, just was just a suggestion that you might want to, want to be keeping a track somehow, so you could use this, but you don't have to. That really was just a suggestion. So timescale. I've put here the word original, because just on the other slide, just when you go to the site, it does say the page might be out of date. So who knows what's going to be happening, but they will probably put it up to date again after the announcement. But at the moment, what we were told was hand-in date for grades is May the 7th, with the declaration form going in on May the 15th. But we are awaiting more information from the exam boards.
And can I also at this point just come back to the other really important timeline that Stephen picked up, which is the announcement the week beginning the 22nd of February from DFE and Ofqual around the overall response to the totality of the consultation. And you may not be aware that actually Ofqual had 100,000 responses to their consultation, and 50,000 of those were from students. And what was clear was it was highly unusual that the CEO of Ofqual actually did a blog before the consultation finished. And if you read between the lines, because they'd had 50,000 responses from students, he was pushing back because clearly the response from students had been, we don't want anything that looks like an exam. We want the grades that we deserve. And I can see there's going to be a significant tension there, and hence really why it's worth waiting until we get that announcement. We begin the 22nd, and avoiding anything that could be construed as exam by another name, anything that's too high stakes, anything about communication. Just be wary of the level of emotion that's out there. We'll pick that up later, but I just wanted to highlight that too in terms of timing.
But you're not saying avoiding doing speaking, it's just avoiding the contact with, we're thinking ahead to the business about parents and that sort of formality of that sort of thing, but it's not saying don't do it. No. So that's your timeline.
Oh, sorry. And we are aware, in view of comments in chat, some schools may be wishing to have earlier deadlines. Obviously that's at the end of the day, that's between you and your school, which is highlighting to you this wider context. And the other thing is that a big driver on the consultation was that students should be incentivized to keep working and engaging right through till May and June. So I think again that's something just to play back, and we'll see that in the announcement in the week after half term. But obviously schools are in a different situation. They're trying to balance lots of things. Yeah, it's difficult for everybody, and it's just trying to work your way through that.
Am I right that there has been some confusion that some exam officers have looked at the NEA date?
But the NEA date's been taken off the AQA website.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really, at the moment, nobody know nothing. And
it's really helpful.
Just sort of trying to muddle through a bit, doing some stuff, but not committing yourself too much one way or the other, just so you don't get caught out. I think that's, yeah.
Okay, so that's... So number 5 is almost thinking about what activities could we do, and we covered this in December. So we've got a whole list on 3 sides of what activities we could do. We put them together, and they are pretty much divided into things which you can do which are to do with dialogue, conversation, so two-way, because for the communication and interaction, and that's the key thing, and interaction, you do need something which is seeing whether or not they can interact. Whereas there are frankly loads of other things you can do for a presentation type context, where you can work out somebody's range, accuracy and pronunciation, where it can be just a one-way thing in speaking. So looking here then, here's what I've made. You can't possibly read it, but this is just to show you these are all the ideas that we got from people. Here we've got all the ones which are to do with conversation and dialogue there, and here are all the ones to do with the presentation, where you've got to have something for communication interaction. All of these could also be done that way. And here I've just summarized then. So here are the types of things people came up with for what you could do for your communication interaction. Also, although you'd also get these things. So exam type tasks. People who've been preparing anyway for the conversation, just doing that, so that as you're doing your writing and practicing for the writing exam or whatever that's going to be, they can be doing the conversation alongside it. That was a quick mute there, Michelle. Very quick. And some people did say the original role play, the original photo card. But obviously it doesn't have to be the original. You could even make it, dare I say, that you have the, you know, the questions could be in English. It's you decide what you want to do. Exam writing task as a stimulus with the teacher talking through that. Exam photo question, but doing that aloud first of all. Talking about listening, general classroom chat as people come in. Listening, classroom chat, and classroom games. Games are a fantastic way, aren't they, of being able to hear people speak one way and the other. So, right. And then here are the sorts of things, these are the headings for the presentation. Just reading aloud, doing a translation. So giving them a stimulus for saying sentences, translation games, saying something in a different style, secret choice games. And alongside that came the discussion about what tech you needed to be able to do it. So people talked about a Chrome extension, Chrome extension, Vockeroo, Flipgrid, mobile phones, that sort of thing. So we're up to the bit nearly where we're going to be saying to you, could you flood the chat with these ideas? What realistic opportunities are there for judging levels in lockdown? So we've got 2 weeks after half term when we'll be still in lockdown. So obviously some people have got these platforms. Most of us, I'm sure, are using platforms, whether it's Teams, using OneNote within Teams, Sanico, Flipgrid, Google Classroom. Also, there's the synchronous. A lot more people are doing live face-to-face online lessons. You can use breakout rooms. We had a fantastic session yesterday on our webinar where someone was talking about how you can have breakout rooms and you can record what is going on in the breakout rooms. If you've got a language assistant to use them, teacher, pupil, 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 and even, this was something which at the webinar, somebody said, well, I can't ever get in touch with them because they haven't got the internet. It was, well, you could phone them. So there are things that people might be able to do. There are, however, we know these constraints. Here are some of them. People not being there or refusing to attend. Home quality of internet might be poor. You might be sharing computers. It might be you've got a very big class, so a teacher can't necessarily do this with 30 students at the same time. So we know that there are these constraints. So here we are, when it's in red, this is where we're asking now, what is working for you in lockdown? Is there anybody out there who actually is doing some form of assessing? And either you could be writing down there, or if you're happy to open up your mic and tell us, you could do that. And this is Jane who will take over on this bit, I think. Right, the next thing is, what realistic opportunities are there for judging level in school? And again, we talked about it before when we weren't in, when we hadn't had so much experience of it. So it's really asking, when in school, you've still got all of these other things possibly that we've been doing, because, if you're in the computer room or you've got access to computers, you might be able to do those things. But here you've got the option then, haven't you, I suppose, of whole class participation, observing pair work, teacher, pupil, individual or group. But there may be constraints. Certainly found this in the last time. There were some people who were saying, I'm not allowed to have the children come up and speak to me, or the children all have to wear masks, or there were reasons why. Some people were saying actually it's still a problem there. So I think the next question is, you've now, between September and December, you had an experience of being able to do things. What did you find in your experience? What worked with you when there were still these COVID restrictions? So perhaps you'd like to, again, write down things that did work. And it could be that people are saying, well, these are my problems. Can someone tell me a way around it? How to establish departmental approach. Obviously, that's something where we'd be interested now in knowing, have people done that already? How did you decide your departmental approach? In the last webinar, we put forward some suggestions. If you have done that, how have you done it? So a suggestion here is that you have some sort of common script, perhaps, where every teacher is going to say the same to the children. And then you have some idea as to, is there going to be any, how are you going to decide to do it? Because of the idea that people aren't being expected to have evidence, how are you working that out with your department? Is it working to say to people, we have integrity, we trust each other? What are people doing?
Yeah. And can I come into that point? Because I've been seeing some of the things in the text, and it comes back to this sort of tick with integrity and how you want to do it. I mean, one starting point could be, as experienced teachers, you know the students, you could look through the grids and almost just give a broad approximation as to what, given that the Secretary of State said that the children should get the grades they deserve, to some extent that's saying to teachers, gives them the grades that they deserve, give them the endorsement that they deserve. In one sense, you could just be taking that as a view, and then you're doing what the Secretary of State is asking for. That's the kind of tension that's out there, because Ofqual are then pushing back and saying there needs to be a standard. But that's where it'll be really interesting to see what emerges out of the consultation decisions when you've got that strong political imperative that the students are to get the grades they deserve. So you may wish to start with almost just looking at that grid and then just giving your impression, and then deciding within your own integrity, within your school's own integrity, how much effort, how much evidence are you going to put into almost fleshing out the grades that you're going to submit. And that very much will be a decision for each individual and each school within all the constraints that they've got. There is not a prescriptive, you must do this, you must do that at the moment. And it's just that zeitgeist or mood music that I think people need to be aware of, and that will become much clearer when you get the outcome of the DFE and Ofqual joint consultation, and see how almost the political aspect and are the students just going to get the grades they deserve, which is a very emotive phrase.
So that's, I can see the time's going. We just got I think 3 more things. How would you share the process and criteria with the pupils? And that's where the idea is that you're avoiding appeals. You're trying to make it, there are no surprises at all. I think we discussed this earlier on, didn't we? But, it could be that you have the student copy, which is shared. There are ongoing ticks and they can see what you're doing, but they can't edit it. Could be perhaps you give them a sheet and say, you tell me what you think. And you could then, it's up to them to be able to demonstrate they can do those things. But whatever it is, probably having some sort of common script in the department. So I've already shown you that as the idea that AQA gave as to what you could do. Florence, I think you made reference to this idea of telling them what sort of range you might be looking for the various aspects. And again, we'll have a pupil-friendly version. And I've put together something which, if anybody wanted to look at it as an idea, there's a sort of script that a teacher could give to the pupils to explain what the process is, and really stressing this is not a test. This is the approach that we're taking. So I don't know if anybody wants to just write down how you're sharing. Have you shared the process with the criteria? How's it gone? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And then the other thing is, how would you track the progress in the department? Is it something where, as a head of department, you want to know what other people are doing? Where would you locate those records? You're going to make it electronic or paper? Is there going to be a central record, a central folder, or nothing? I mean, we are told you don't need evidence.
The only thing is the head of centre has to sign something that says that students have had the opportunity to speak. Nothing about the standard, but the head of centre does need to sign something saying that students have had the opportunity to speak. And picking up an earlier question, if they refuse to speak, then it would be a not classified, because if you're entered for the exam, you're automatically, the endorsement is part of that. And if they actually refuse to speak, then that would be a not classified.
And I just realised that I hadn't scrolled down on the chat. And in fact, there are lots of ideas there about central trackers, that sort of thing. And it could be that people would like to just email me with, or give us a link to anything that you want to share with other people. I've seen that some people have come up with some ready-made Excel spreadsheets which people might be able to use. And the last thing is, we had another one, didn't we? I'm just aware of time. Approach to parents. And in a way, I think we made a strong recommendation because of the current situation. Don't know whether you've done it already, but it is this idea, be very, very sensitive, because we don't know what's going to be happening really. And people are in a really delicate state, aren't they, and worried about exams. So if anybody's got any recommendation on that, then feel free to share that. And I think that was the end. So, and yes, Jane, if you want to take up any other ideas or...
Yes, I think Vincent's made a very good point, is that when you get down to it, and what David said as well, we just need to give them the opportunity to speak, in as many ways as we can, and don't get too fixated about, thinking it's like a test, because we don't, your school may need some evidence, but the exam boards are not asking for evidence. You have to be able to say you've given the opportunity, and your professional judgment, you're ticking with integrity, and this is what they're capable of doing. Because I think we're in some ways teachers are our own worst enemies, and we end up by making it much more complicated than it's meant to be. But yes, I mean, I think there's been some very good points as well, and there's some sharing about where how people are doing the central record keeping, which I'm sure will be useful for everybody.
Okay, so it's now, we've had an hour.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you particularly to everyone who's been on the webinar tonight for being prepared to speak up and share your ideas. And I mean, the whole point of this was to share and hopefully be reassuring that we can do it. That we give the students opportunities to cover, to speak, and we know them well enough to say, right, well, that they are at this standard. We need to make sure that we can say with honesty that we can tick with integrity, and that they can cover the criteria that Ofqual and the exam boards are asking for. And we're using those handy sheets that Helen showed us as a way of a record keeper rather than a test, because that's the best way to look at them. It's just so that you've got a mental note that that all your classes has an opportunity to do this, and you've seen them do it. And I just wish us all the very best of luck, and we'll have to wait and see what the 22nd brings. It is a most difficult time. It's not just the pupils, it's teachers, it's just a nightmare as well. So I think that everything we can do to make it more bearable and support each other, and then ALL really wants to help in this. And I'm sure everyone will agree that that's what the webinar this evening has really done, is to show that there's solidarity here, and we want to make the best of the situation we can for all our pupils. So if I've taken my glasses off, so I can't see the chat now. Is anything will come up?
I noticed a few
want to say something
earlier on.
Yes.
Just go back to one or two of those.
Yes.
Towards the beginning. Let me just go back up my page here.
you have to go, just to say, if you have to go, we totally understand.
Yes, just please, yes. If you need to go.
Yeah, the one I really liked was the one that said, "I have taught my group for the past 3 years, and I know their level pretty well." I think that's basically the basis for you being ready to do your endorsement. If that's exactly what teachers do. We do know our pupils, and we have an idea of what they're going to get in their exam before we see the results. So that's basically, we're just trying to find a way of validating that within the context of your own institution. And if you have a school that demands different sorts of evidence, then you can tell them that that's not what the exam boards are looking for, and it's not what anybody else is looking for. So they're putting the pressure on you, which isn't really necessary.
Yes, I think that, I'm sure that's absolutely right, Stephen. Even if you've only taught them this year, and even in the really difficult circumstances we've had, you will know, have a really good grasp of, of what your students, where they're at and what they're capable of. And we've given them the opportunity to show it, and that's what we need to do. And as Helen and other colleagues have shown, you can do that whilst preparing them for different tasks, rather than making it an extra burden, which is what we want, and Ofqual wants to avoid. Well, I think if we haven't got anything else that people want to add now, I think probably we bring it to an end, because everybody has had a long day before we started on this. And I hope it's been helpful. It's certainly been great to see everybody here and contributing to the thoughts on how we can all cope with this. And we wish you all the best. And I hope you get a restful half term as well, which is coming up shortly at least. And thank you, Helen. Thank you, Steve. And also thank you, David, for giving us a head teacher's perspective, which is always really welcome. So good night to everybody. And we'll be back again when we know, well, after the 22nd, when we know what's happening.
We'll be back again.
We'll be back. We'll meet again, as they say. And don't forget Language World. It's your chance to join ALL now and really get a good deal. So I'll say good night then. Bye to everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Jane. That's great.